Your business is constantly changing from the effects of growth, competition, economics, government. Some changes are unforeseen, to be sure, but the strongest executive can even plan profitably for the unexpected by using the modern organizational techniques explored in this edition of Executive Seminars in Sound. Here are 8 practical lessons for organizing your plans and planning your organization. Growth is the goal of most companies, but to grow successfully, the company must change to accommodate growth. Here's a case history in how to organize for company growth.
And now, I give you the man who made it possible for all of us to be here together tonight to enjoy this fine dinner and meet all these people from 2 great firms that have joined their efforts under the leadership of a single team. The founder and chairman of Porter Products, and now the chairman of Henderson Porter, Mr. George Anthony Porter.
Distinguished guests, associates, friends, this is a great moment for all of us. But it can be a meaningful one only if we reflect on where we've been down through the years in order to know where we're going in the years ahead. I remember the day I went into business. It was a delightful spring day, much as this has been. Rainy, foggy, raw, with patches of snow on the ground and roads so muddy they were grabbing at my wagon axles. My brother Danny here was my manufacturing superintendent, and like most plant men, he had a complaint.
But George, what am I supposed to do while you're gone?
Mix up more soap and fill all the bottles. A nickel for every bottle you fill, and pay a dime for every bottle you break.
Then what, George?
Try to find a way to get that soap to harden so we don't have to buy bottles. Be back in a week, Danny.
Good luck, George.
Danny was only 18, and I was a wise old 20 when I took to the road in that old wagon through the hard farms of New England peddling soap. Danny found out how to harden the soap, but by then our liquid soap had caught on. Soon I knew that if I was going to keep ahead of my creditors with my big plans, it was going to take more than me and a wagon out there. So I broke in 4 salesmen, outfitted them, loaded them up with soap and notions to make it worth their while, and sent them on their way. And then Denny needed help.
George, you've got to listen to me.
Later, Denny, later. I've got to see Amos Whitten. You know he runs the biggest grocery chain in New England. He's waiting now, Denny, and I just can't...
George, I can't keep up with things now, and if you sell a grocery chain, don't you understand, George, there's only one of me.
You got Chet Beasley?
Only one of me and a crippled old man when he's sober enough to work, and 4 of you out selling. Look, George, there's no sense in selling all this stuff if I can't make it fast enough.
Okay, Denny. We'll do something after I've seen Whitten this afternoon.
Promise?
Promise. So I got Denny a helper. Then we got more people ordering our soap from stores, and I began to take my peddlers off the road because it was a pretty expensive way of doing business. But they were good men, and I didn't want to let them go. I decided to make them all assistants or helpers, doing whatever I happened to need them to do at the moment. We bought out a bleach company in northern New England, and I found myself traveling more and more with Denny at home minding the store. He had a pretty fair-sized factory by now, well-equipped for the times, and about 20 employees to do the work. That didn't include the half-dozen helpers that we had between us. For some reason or other, even though they had plenty to do, they seemed to be getting more and more underfoot. Denny, as usual, put his finger on the trouble.
George, we've got to do something about our assistants.
Do about them? Why should we do anything? They work hard and...
They work hard, but they have to come to me or to you every step of the way. Now, we're spending all of our time telling them what we want. Now, take Frank, for instance. He's handling our shipping right now because I don't have time. But if I wasn't here, everything would stop.
I see what you mean.
In fact, if anything happened to either of us, the whole house of cards would collapse. We've got to make up our minds at this point.
We had to make up our minds whether we were going to be a real, honest-to-goodness, grown-up company or just keep on being 2 brothers trying to get along running the whole show. I could see the warning signals. We were leaving our infancy. And from then on, I never stopped looking for signs to tell me to stand pat and stop growing or reorganize and get bigger. I started concentrating on management, developing executives who are willing to do the same. We have a little exercise, and we still use it. At least once a year, I write down what I think defines each manager's responsibilities, authority, and relationships to other company activities. And each manager does this in turn with his subordinates. Meanwhile, the feedback comes up the line with each person in the management chain defining his own job, and, well, sometimes we have a great time comparing notes. Now we're completely decentralized on a planned basis with adequate controls to provide limits for exercise of authority. We set policy and control at the top, and that's all. Knowing when to change is the secret. Personalized direction must end when you can't see to things personally anymore. Strong management must be developed, and to do this, you have to give your people hope and responsibility. The reason that we're here tonight is because, together, we've done all these things.
Never look backward. Something might be gaining on you. Satchel Paige, the legendary pitcher and ageless sage of Major League locker rooms, said it, and it's one of the most practical business epigrams ever uttered. Looking ahead is what keeps business vital and alive, and planning ahead translates foresight into action. Your future and the future of your company depend on how you and your associates plan, why you plan, how you time your planning, and what you do about converting your plans into successful action. It all begins by knowing how to plan by priority. Now, we've been taught from childhood to roll up our sleeves and solve the tough ones first. Without realizing, putting important things above everything else doesn't mean to put them before everything else. To reach our main goals, it's often necessary to do many lesser things first, things that pave the way for the bigger ones.
I tell you, if you'll just get down to cases and tackle the big problems first, the little problems will take care of themselves. The trouble with most people is they're unwilling to come to grips with tough reality.
That's Titus Howell, and he's a very lucky man. For years, ever since he founded his company, he's arranged his priorities that way and managed to bungle through somehow without serious problems. One day, Titus Howell learned a hard lesson. His company had been having problems with a portable hair dryer that they manufactured, and Howell had set up several engineering teams to work on the problem. Unfortunately, there were no clear instructions as to which problem was most urgent and which team should come up with their solution first. One of the teams was redesigning the case for the dryer so it would accommodate the electric cord more conveniently. Titus was delighted when his design engineer brought in a workable new design after a relatively short period.
Beautiful, Smedley. That's just beautiful.
Thank you, Mr. Howell. I'm glad you like it.
I want you to take that down to manufacturing right away, Smedley. I'm calling right now to give the go-ahead, and... Hello? Hello, is that you, Stevens? Look, Stevens, Smedley's team has come up with a great design.
In his enthusiasm for the solution of this one problem, however, Howell overlooked the fact that other teams were working on different aspects of the hairdryer problem. It was after the new carrying case was in production when another design engineer reported for a conference at Howell's office.
Well, Davis, I see you stuck with your project to the bitter end. I must apologize for not letting you know that we had Smedley's plan already in production. Well, the least I can do is look at your design for the hairdryer case and...
But Mr. Howell, I wasn't working on the case. Don't you remember you had me working on the self-contained cordless dryer that doesn't need a case?
A cordless?
Yes, sir. Here it is. Isn't it a beauty?
Oh, no.
Sir?
I mean, it is a beauty. Stevens? Is that you, Stevens? We've got to stop production on that case and tool up for a whole new dryer. Oh, I know, I can't help it.
And there it was, lost production, extra tooling expense, time and money gone, because no clear priorities were established to start.
Yes, I learned a hard and expensive lesson. That's to think through the value of alternative solutions when organizing to solve a problem. And then organize the effort to concentrate on finding the most valuable solution first if possible.
This is the way Titus Howell thinks nowadays. He's disciplined himself to consider every undertaking in terms of logical priority, rather than trying to solve the tough ones first. He's even devised a system for keeping him on the track.
It's a pretty simple little gimmick, really. If I have a simple problem in front of me, I write down each of the separate things that has to be done on a little filing card. Then I rearrange the cards in logical order, putting on the top of the pile the steps that I have to take before I can get to the problems at the bottom of the pile. The important thing is that you continue to review your priorities until the project is completed. It's such a simple system that you wonder why you need to use it at all, especially when so many problems are eliminated in early stages. But believe me, using a system like this to put priorities in logical perspective can't be beaten for an easy way to save your company time, money, and duplication of effort.
One of the most important elements in the accomplishment of any company goal is the element of control. You just don't plan to get from here to there. You build into your plan guidelines and checkpoints to measure and control your progress toward success. My name is Albert Hathaway. I'm president of a firm that was making lamp wicks 100 years ago. Since that time, we've manufactured freight cars, insulation materials, fire safety devices, cargo handling equipment, most recently industrial storage modules that can be quickly customized to fit almost any need. So I think that we know a good bit about how much the success of growth and planning depend upon efficiency of controls. Now take these storage modules, for example. The idea originated with one of our sales engineers, Ted Nelson.
Yes, Mr. Hathaway, I have worked up a plan, but it's going to require our going outside for some of our components, as well as revamping manufacturing space, developing a new processing line, and some auxiliary shipping facilities.
How about sales?
Oh, I don't think there'll be too much burden on either sales or sales promotion to get underway. There's a hungry market out there with rapidly changing storage and container needs, but no one to fill those needs without a delay of from 4 to 5 months.
Of course, you realize, Ted, that we're going to have to be much more specific in our objectives.
Specific?
Yes, you see, we've got what looks like a superior idea here, and I think it's going to be profitable to us. Your designs are good and your insight's sound, but we need more. So to start with the blessing of your division manager, John Alspeth, I want you to dig into planning the development of this project step by step, setting up a realistic schedule of cost for each step of the way, and a specific timetable of where you expect to be any given week. All of this will give you and anyone concerned valuable control guidelines.
Say, wait a minute, Mr. Hathaway. That's a pretty big job, and I don't know.
It is a big job, and I'm glad you realize it. But you're going to have plenty of help, and you're not going to be held responsible for anything that you don't control. Instead, you'll be more a focal point of activity with guidance from design, manufacturing, sales, accounting, advertising, personnel, the shooting match. It's your baby, but it's the company's baby too, and we all need to know what's going on. Now, let's start in. I want you to make up a schedule of what needs to be done and where you expect to be at any given time. And go to accounting, and we'll see that someone's assigned to costing the whole undertaking. And this will be the first major control checkpoint. And then
Excuse me, Mr. Hathaway, but what about figuring out what we'll need in the way of fabrication and facilities and people, too, and materials?
Good thinking, Ted. That's why we need your list of priorities in chronological order, because each one will be a major control checkpoint for each of the activities. Now get along with John Alspeth and the controller. They're waiting for you in John's office. And Ted...
Yes, Mr. Hathaway?
Keep in touch.
Ted, as your immediate boss, I'll probably be closer to this project than anyone else in the company except you, but because I have a few other responsibilities, and I don't want to breathe down your neck, I want you to let me know where you are in progress on each of these target dates we've set up.
I'll be glad to report to you daily if you want, Mr. Alspeth.
No, Ted. I'm afraid that wouldn't be economical use of your time. Each of these target dates will be often enough.
Now, suppose I don't meet the targets. I mean, a lot of things can happen to change.
And you just could run ahead of schedule, too. Ted, I realize that this is a big jump for you. And that's why we're imposing this system of reports and controls. If you fall behind on your schedule, there's got to be a reason. It could be something unforeseen, beyond anyone's control. In that case, we'll just have to adjust our schedule to fit the new requirements. We'll certainly not blame you if you can't help it. By the same token, you are responsible for the aspects of the project that you can control. If it turns out, however, that the job is too much for you, chances are we'll have to get someone on it who can handle it. I'd be very much surprised if that were to happen, though. At any rate, we'll all be watching the same controls, following the same timetables and schedules, and I think together we can see things through before they happen.
Needless to say, everything worked out very well indeed. Ted is director of a control team during the first year of manufacture. This team's guiding the new product effort, action subject to review by Elspeth, our controller, and me. If all goes well, although Ted Nelson doesn't know it yet, he'll be on his own heading up a new division within the next 12 months. But controls will always be there. Ted's pretty well indoctrinated in our way of running things now, and I believe that he's more control conscious than anyone in our company. Here's what he had to say recently at a company seminar on plans and projects controls.
To sum up, objectives have to be clear-cut and responsibilities well-defined. You need to plan on predetermined points and times during your project that will be strategic times to take measurements to see how you're doing. Standards of success or failure must be clear and objective so that every man knows, without being told, whether he's doing his job or not. Nobody has a crystal ball, so controls should be flexible enough to be able to adjust to unforeseen changes. Planning, organization, action, vigilance. These are the key words which guide business plans to success.
Profit. That's what business is all about. And profit has to be planned into the pricing of your product or service. Here's a case history, fictitious to be sure, but listen carefully, for the method of pricing products for profit is all here.
All right, gentlemen. Let's start by listing all of the features that this item has that are different from anything else our competitors have to offer. First of all, I believe the most obvious is its versatility.
Lucius Finley, president of a modest company which manufactures home appliances, and his key executives are in the process of arriving at a price for a new product. In today's markets, accurate pricing can make or break a new product, which under easier conditions might have made money without question. Similarly, the making and breaking of the product through pricing can make or break a company. Finley's company, of which he was the founder, has managed, after a desperate struggle to get started, to generate modest profits every year. But what was needed badly was a leading item, which not only would give the company a strong identity, but would also improve the profit picture generously. Now, in an unusual multi-purpose kitchen appliance, they believe they have the answer. But it means drastic adjustments in policy and operation throughout the firm. Andrew Sims, Vice President of Marketing, is speaking.
In reply to your question, Luke, I don't believe there's any question that there's any product like it anywhere. And it's not just a Rube Goldberg gadget. Although I bet a lot of men will buy it for their wives because they'll delight in its novelty.
Do you think people will be willing to pay more for this?
Well, it depends upon what you mean by more. You have the services of 4 appliances in one. At least 2, the mixer and the blender, are essential in today's kitchen, and the others are mighty nice to have. The whole thing takes up less space than any other 2 appliances. It's portable, yet an attractive, heavy-duty item. Now, based on quality, you'd pay $150 to $175 to get all of these appliances separately.
Well, what kind of a price tag do you think we ought to put on this, Andy?
Hard to say off the top of my head, Luke. The product certainly has advantages to make people pay more, but if someone has any one of the items it includes, he's going to think twice before he buys. And it'll take some special merchandising and heavy advertising to educate people to a new concept.
How about volume?
I've been looking into the replacement potential. People who replace old appliances, and at first glance it looks very good. This is our market primarily. And people who are buying a mixer or blender for the first time, we need to break in plenty of time for Christmas. That could give us a good kickoff.
How about our distribution system? Will this fit in?
Oh, definitely, yes. I think that we're in a position to price for a good markup by both distributors and dealers, plus offering bonuses in one of our good blenders for every 2 or 3 of these that they sell. Now, before we do anything else, we need to make an in-depth market survey.
Planning for pricing begins with analyzing the market potential, acceptability, competitive pricing and products, and distribution. His next step is to determine accurately how much it's going to cost to produce the product. A market survey by Andy Sims indicates that an initial sales potential is in the range of between 15 and 20,000 units, and Finley sets this as his manufacturing goal. Now he's getting down to cases with his cost accountant, Everett Mount.
Now, what about variable manufacturing cost per unit, Eb?
It comes to pretty close to $65 for direct material, direct labor, and variable overhead. Now, sales and administration shouldn't run too high, because this can pretty well be absorbed in our present setup. We're writing about 10% for that on our other items.
So we still have to have marginal income to cover our costs of introducing the product, which will run higher than usual, fixed expenses, and of course our profit.
Well, we usually run about 20% on marginal income.
We're going to put a big rush on this one, so let's boost that to 25%. Now, let's see. That brings us to 35% for sales and marginal income. Let's shoot for a target selling price. That leaves 65% for manufacturing, and 65% divided into $65 gives us $100. Well, that's our target price, $100. Now, how do you figure profitability, Ev?
Well, let's see here. Our marginal income for profit and sales is 35%. Let's say we sell 15,000 units. Now, that's $1.5 million. 35% of that is $525,000, less sales costs and fixed expenses of $200,000. That's profitability of $325,000 before taxes.
Well, that's all very fine on paper, but there are competitors out there ready to shoot them down if they make a mistake on price. Really, all Finley knows is what his target price should be. But now the question is the target price realistic? Andy Sims has completed his survey, and the item has been introduced in 5 test markets at 5 different prices. The product is ready to roll off the assembly lines, but final pricing has not yet been set.
Well, Andy, we've got a lot invested, but it's not too late to turn back without hurting ourselves permanently. Ready to set a price?
Before I do, let me hear about that capability study you had made of our competitors.
Well, here it is. As far as we can tell is that the best that any of the big ones could do is manufacture at about $80 per unit. That gives us a lot of leeway on price as far as big competitors are concerned. One smaller one could probably do as well as we can, but their finances are not in shape to take this kind of a risk with a new product.
Are you inclined to take the cream off the top with a big price before the competition comes in?
Well, this will be a prestige item and certainly can carry a good price tag, but even at reasonable profit, the price is going to be pretty steep. No, I think not. No creaming. I believe we can price as low as $92.50 and be safe.
Let's go for $98. Don't ask me why, but it's a fact that people will more readily pay that price than $92.50.
Okay, anything you say. $98 it is.
In planning for profit, estimating costs may be a matter of formula to some degree, but estimating price is a matter of value judgment based on long, hard experience, market surveys, and sales tests of the product. When all considerations have been made, then it's time to go back and re-estimate your expected profits. If the profit is there, go ahead, full steam. If not, try the system on something else. Vegetable soup, ham on rye and milk, dull and repetitious, but safe.
Unless you like to live dangerously, Harry, my boy.
Yeah.
My ham is on white. Anything new about what's going on in this company?
Well, I sent out another message in a bottle this morning to find out whether they want me to do anything besides report on what I'm not doing. But as usual, vast silence. How about you, Jack?
Nary a word in our department. I think we've been marooned or left for dead. When the word's passed down the line as to which one it is, I'll let you know.
Two very junior executives in the cafeteria of a huge company, sharing the misery of frustration with forced humor, until the time comes when they've had enough and they leave to take jobs in smaller firms where there's more challenge and personal identification with company objectives. Some businesses, as they grow larger, gradually become so dedicated to organization of the massive operation that they become over-organized, and most people in them become victims of the big company organizational syndrome. At this very moment, 9 floors above in the executive dining room, the president and executive vice president of the company are lunching together.
You know, Stan, not so very long ago, whenever our firm was faced with the possibility of being badly hurt by our competition, ideas began to bubble up through the organization. And then with a kind of a corporate hoop and holler, everyone got on a bandwagon, made sparks fly. We never doubted ourselves or our capabilities. I just wonder where they all went.
Where all what went?
The bubbles, the ideas, the enthusiasm, the team spirit.
Well, after all, we've gotten pretty big.
We were big before. Beyond the point that getting any bigger should have had any effect. You know what I've been doing every night for the past 3 weeks?
I doubt if I could ever guess.
I've been reading every manual on administrative procedures, every memorandum on interdepartmental protocol, every method we're using to find out what's going on in this company. And you know what we're doing?
Strangling ourselves to death with our own red tape?
Oh, you've noticed then.
I knew there must be some reason why I don't ever hear from below the 8th floor.
An over-organized company that's being stifled to death by its own systems. Lower-level people stifled and frustrated because they can't get their ideas upward. Upper management calling for ideas from lower levels and never getting them. Rules proliferate in increasing detail governing employee conduct. Chains of command are rigidly established. Decision-making is fractionalized and dispersed at the altar of organization and systems, until, at last, even top management doesn't know what's going on.
Here's a choice rule selected at random. It's not desirable that a manager supervise more than 6 people directly. I wonder what chain of command Earl Weaver used to supervise over 30 Baltimore Orioles into a world championship. Stan, I want you to head up a project to broaden and flatten this company's organizational structure and bring the top closer to the bottom.
Just like that.
Not quite. It's going to take carefully pruning and judicious planning. The main objective is to delegate and decentralize.
What do you think of bringing in franchise teams from the outside on crash projects and just bypass all this rigmarole?
I'd rather not, Stan, but you may have to get us over the hump. I like to see us aim at setting up our own project teams within the company.
How about gleaning the company for some of our most promising young talent in appropriate fields and set up a separate division? Kind of a combat team of corporate rangers to troubleshoot. Give them this little job dealing directly with us for openers.
Now you're catching fire. Call them the Enterprises Division. And get somebody like young Hazelton in merchandising to run it. Then as soon as they get something going, let's review it. Kind of nurse them along until we feel that they can go on their own.
This is the way to start to tame a hierarchy. Tame it, because you can't remove it. Hierarchy will always be a part of a big business, but keep it under control by doing away with the expensive overhead of functions that serve the hierarchy itself. Unneeded administrative analysts, coordinators, expediters, liaison officers, and systems engineers.
I want your Enterprises team to find out how work actually gets done in this company. And I want them to do it without having their hands tied. I want them to get ideas flowing back and forth freely again, to eliminate outdated arrangements. Set up seminars that will start up some interdepartmental cross-pollination that empire building and status seeking have nearly strangled. Let's start setting up project teams and self-sufficient productive divisions with clear-cut goals, clear-cut incentives, and clear-cut rewards. Now let's do away with methods and start developing leaders, goal setters, planners, resource providers, encouragers, persuaders, developers of people and ideas, organizers, trainers, and gadflies.
And what about our researchers, statisticians, expediters, and all...
Fragment them. Make them parts of productive development teams instead of high priests of protocol. They can be helpful too, you know.
Hierarchies will probably continue in their over-organized fashion for some time to come because of fear of change, dedication to tradition, and lack of knowledge of alternatives. But they need not be massive or imposing like the pyramids of Egypt, deeply tiered monuments to absurdity. The future belongs to those who can break the stranglehold of bureaucracy. How do you evaluate the efficiency of an organization? It's an important question in a merger decision, or when you have an opportunity to move into a key position with a new company, or when your own company's organizational efficiency just doesn't seem to be everything it should. Matthew Wellman, president of a medium-sized heavy chemicals company, was faced with the need to evaluate his company's efficiency problem. As he tells the story, his realization that all was not well came upon him gradually.
At first, it seemed to be just a part of the general pattern of things. Industry generally was suffering from increasing cost of materials, and our profit margins were getting thinner and thinner. But there was more than that. So I called in an old friend, Cy Maxwell, who was a specialist at digging into problems like this, and asked him to look into things for me. He started just where I expected he would, with a study of statistics, and I turned over all available data to him. In a little over 3 weeks, he had something to tell me.
Matt, our people have given your figures a pretty thorough going over, but I'm afraid that all we've done is confirm your suspicions.
Well, let's have it anyway, Si.
First of all, you already know that your net profit before taxes is below what you should reasonably expect in your industry.
No, of course I know all that, Si. In fact, that's why I called you in.
Well, let me put it simply, Matt. We've figured added value on each of your products, the difference between cost of manufacturing and services that produce the product and get it to the customer, and your total sales figure. And it's a bad story in every department.
It's a bad story everywhere.
True. But when you divide added value by the number of employees it takes to produce it, you look very bad indeed. In comparison with the rest of the industry, that is.
You mean we're paying more for our product in man-hours than we should?
That's about the size of it.
You mean that's all? Well, where do we go from here?
Well, here's where we really start our study. Now, where's your biggest plant, Crowley?
The biggest and the newest.
Do you have another plant that does the same work?
Yes, there's one in Upper New York State, almost identical.
Crowley's about an hour's drive from here. When's your first shift start?
Well, there's only one shift in all our plants, Si. Starts at 8.
Can you spend the day with me there, starting, say, 8:30?
Unobtrusively.
That's the idea.
I picked up Si at his hotel at 7:30, and even during the hour's drive over there, I learned a lot.
So the first thing I'd recommend is that you dispose of your New York State plant and run 2 8-hour shifts at Crowley if it's technically feasible.
Oh, it's technically feasible, all right. But we'll need room for expansion.
You haven't needed it for 12 years, and even if you do, you can go to 2 10-hour shifts 7 days and try for that 4-day week you've been working on. It still would cost you less than what you're doing now.
When Wellman and Maxwell arrived at the Crowley plant, they found the plant manager having coffee in his office and asked to see the chief engineer. Well, the manager was obviously flustered.
Ted Ketchum, he's out in the plant somewhere. They had a breakdown this morning. Ted went over to fix it. You know Ted loves to get dirt on his hands.
We found Ketchum just as the plant manager said. His sleeves were rolled up, he was dirty and obviously happy fixing the breakdown, while his engineering staff and the idle crew stood by and watched. We told him we were going to look around a while, and he waved cheerfully and went back to his repairs. Cy made the first comment.
A chief engineer is supposed to direct engineers, not to do the work himself. There are 6 men standing around there. Now, what's this area here?
Well, this is our principal manufacturing area, and...
Well, look around you. Slowly. There are what? Maybe 80 men working here. Now, count the ones who are standing around doing nothing. 10, 11, 12, 3 by the water fountain. That's 15, nearly 20%.
That's ridiculous.
Even if it were 5% of your workforce, it'd be ridiculous. Now, take me through your entire operation from beginning to end.
We only got lost twice. Because of makeshift techniques, production lines rambled and doubled back on themselves, an obvious waste of time and manpower. Then Cy took me to inspect the lavatories. They were cluttered, filthy, there was not hot water, and the showers didn't work at all. Other signs of bad morale were evident in the surly attitudes of the men. By the time we left Crowley, I was pretty worked up and anxious to correct the situation.
Matt really got the bit between his teeth. He started checking everything. He went through the offices the way we went through the plant. He found that his VP sales hadn't visited branch sales offices in nearly a year. He made a visit to one sales office and found the salesman sitting around instead of making calls. And then the fur began to fly. Before he was through, Matt Wellman had everybody working purposefully and efficiently, and morale was higher than ever before.
A company is never too big for its president to make a few spot checks now and then. And if he knows what to look for, he can find out whether his company needs improvement. Far better than by sitting in his office and staring at figures.
Policy must be a vital contributing force to your business, not an enshrined relic which is worshipped simply because it's been around for a long time. By the same token, new policies should not be adopted merely because they represent change. A continuing evaluation of your company's policies will save time, cut costs, increase efficiency, and use executive talents more skillfully.
Policy? Let me tell you about policy. When I became president of Felton Stores, we had a board of directors and all the structural complements of today's big business. Papa, Louis Felton, the founder of the stores, had passed away the year before, but he'd brought me up in the business, and I know about policy. Policy was all of those little unwritten laws that Papa had thought up through the years. Like credit, for instance. Papa insisted on approving all credit applications personally. Can you imagine that? With thousands of customers, he was approving credit till the day he died. And by then it was such a big job that was about all he was doing, besides saying hello to old customers in the store. So when I took over, the very first day I called in Harry Bailey, our credit manager. Harry, as long as I'm running this store and starting this minute, I don't want to see another credit application.
Okay by me, Sterling. You know, the only reason I brought them in, it was an unwritten law from your father, that he got to see every one of them. And they'd all been approved. He rarely saw the ones we turned down.
Unwritten law. I guess we've got a lot of them around, and it's high time someone did something about it. Especially that one about taking exchanges back to the counter where you bought the item. That's more problem than it's worth.
Merchandising, Eddie Hunt.
That you, Eddie? Eddie, as merchandising manager, what do you think about setting up a department to take care of all exchanges and customer complaints instead of handling them at point of purchase?
I don't know, Sterling. You know, your dad was
I know, Dad was a people lover. He liked the personal touch, but it's getting pretty tough to be personal when you're as big as we are. Now, Eddie, I want you to see what you can do about it. I made a bad mistake on that one, and it taught me a hard lesson.
Sterling, I tell you, you gotta let those customers take their returns back to the counter where they bought them and get rid of the exchange desk.
I know it's rough, but we've only tried it for 3 months, and we've got money
I don't care how much money. You're gonna lose it all to those people down the street. 3 months, 3,000 years. This store has always been...
That taught me a lesson. But there were still old policies, Papa's unwritten laws kicking around and slowing us down, and they needed re-examination. And that was the magic word, re-examination. Now, one of these was a policy against leased departments. Now, this time I called Eddie Hunt in beforehand, and I tried a different tack. You've been around a long time, Eddie.
So? You getting ready to sweep me out?
Eddie, you know better. No, I just wanted to ask you, how come Papa never had any leased departments?
He did. Just once. He let a guy come in with a drugs and sundries shop. It was during Prohibition and...
Oh, I remember. The guy started selling booze over the prescription counter, and we nearly had the store shut down for good, and Dad said, never again, right?
Right.
But you know our shoe department ought to be leased.
Maybe Oriental rugs, too. That was a pattern for the study of all of our dusty policies. First, who started it? Usually it was Papa. And then, when was it started and why? A lot of times we'd be able to stop right there, but if there were the least bit of doubt, I've had everybody write down the policy in his own words. Then I'd talk to the people who had to live with that policy. For example, when we reevaluated Papa's policy on exchanges, I talked to Harvey Burke. He's the buyer in our men's furnishings department.
Sterling, I knew you were going to have trouble when you discontinued your dad's policy on exchanges.
Why didn't you tell me?
Well, you didn't ask. If you had, I guess I'd have told you that even though it's one of the biggest headaches, there's a good reason to keep it. Oh, sure, I know we even exchange lines we don't carry. And once we exchanged an old Atwater Kent radio a customer bought from your dad back in the 30s. On the other hand, we've built our business on a personal basis, and the exchange policy is one way we have of proving it. In a time when it seems like that everyone's getting too big to care what the customer thinks.
Finally, a big day came when we entered into agreements for 6 leased departments in our main store. At the same time, we opened 2 suburban stores within a year of each other. Well, Papa said he'd never leave downtown, and we didn't. Now, this meant a lot of wrenching changes in the organization, but morale had been low because of business fall-off in the entire downtown area, and we needed to do something to get people enthused again. And finally, I took a long, hard look at myself, the guy who was making the policy changes. I thought of how I might have to justify these policies. It was a tough test, but I came out of it with confidence. Now my son Dan is coming up through the store, and someday he may want to review my policies. But I guarantee you, he'll know how to do it. Right, Dan?
Study the history of the policy, describe it in writing, get others to explain it, especially those who have to live with it. Invite constructive suggestions, compare it with the practices of other companies. Make a ceremony out of policy change. Look at yourself as the policy maker and check the follow-through. And that's one set of policies I'll never change.
This is the office of Parker Wilcox. It's high-ceilinged, richly appointed, with striking murals in the style of the 20s decorating the walls. It's well-groomed, well-kept, as is the man behind the fine, hand-rubbed walnut desk, who sits, fingers making a rooftop under his chin, and seems to stare into space. Parker Wilcox is president of a publishing house, specializing in various technical books and periodicals. He's been cut off from the world for hours like this. Sometimes he gets up and paces. Sometimes he studies the portfolio on his desk. Sometimes he makes notes. This man, Parker Wilcox, knows that his company must make dramatic and drastic changes to survive. And he's been a part of it for 35 years. In 5 years, he must retire. Can he, deeply bound in his company's history, make the kind of change that's needed smoothly? Reorganization of a company without crisis begins with its top leadership. Wilcox's mind is churning with this knowledge as he begins with self-evaluation.
Parker Wilcox, my friend, are you ready for this? To build all of this through the years and then sell the printing plant and go to our toughest competitor as a customer. Start a new division to get into audio cassettes with a view to video cassettes when the time comes. Ending publication of our periodicals and concentrating on books. These are the facts of life, my friend. At age 60, can you do this with something more than lip service? With the enthusiasm that will carry the others along? By golly, yes. It's exciting. Stirs the blood. Just what I need to feel alive again. This old company has dragged me in its rut long enough. Well, get out and get it done and have some fun while we're at it.
It's a tough job ahead. Top executives have to answer the same questions Parker Wilcox did. They have to look forward to a concept of decentralization, of team activity, of purchase of services as opposed to self-containment, of the comfortable inertia of business as usual. Parker Wilcox will have to resell his leadership first. How he does it is very important. Within a week, top leadership is in his office.
All right, gentlemen. May I have your attention? Okay, gentlemen. You know where we're going now, and I can tell you that we have a room full of mixed emotions here. My personal feeling is that this executive team is as good as it ever was. You all have the same intelligence, breadth, attitude, maturity, and imagination that you've always had. Now, the big question is how you feel about it. Whether you want to go ahead with us or take a different direction. Yes, Tom, you have a question.
You bet I do. As head of the manufacturing division, where do I fit into this picture when our printing plant is gone?
Tom, you were making things hum in production before we had the plant. We'll still handle production here.
But you're getting into automation, and I don't know much about that, at least from a practical standpoint.
But I'll bet you've been learning all you could about it. Seems to me you've been bringing up automated typesetting and proofreading every chance you've had. Then we'll want to set up our audio recording division. Look, Tom, you're a manager and a darn good one. We're still going to need you. Same responsibility and bigger chance to do something.
Well, when you put it that way.
And so it went, pointing out to each executive the necessity for change and how it would affect him. Parker Wilcox left no room for doubt. And he didn't just tell them the good things alone. He brought in the negatives, too, if only to show how they were outweighed by the positive factors.
I anticipated strong resistance to change at all levels from the people who seemed enthusiastic. People get comfortable in their way of doing things, and change will disrupt all of that. Manufacturing head Tom Tate put it very well.
You know, this whole idea really shook me up at first. But I'd been watching this company sliding, with my department losing money every year, and I was pretty distressed to start with. It was good to be vindicated, to know that someone agreed that I'd done everything I could to keep things going, that change was what we needed to give us all some hope. It was one of the biggest morale boosters we could have, to know exactly where we were going.
Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There was one vice president who resented the changes and couldn't see the possibilities for him, and he took early retirement. And then we watched down through the ranks for reactions, particularly for the foremen who took out their resentments on their subordinates. The lavatory lawyer who suspected that the company had some devious plot against him. The man who pretended to cooperate while sabotaging the effort. We dealt with these people summarily, and even in the new era, discipline was maintained just as tightly as it had ever been. The important point was that we prepared people for the change, showed them how change would work to their advantage in income, security, and other vital matters about which they'd been worrying for some time. I suppose we could have gone in with a bludgeon, cleaned house, and brought in new people already trained in the job, but that would be out of character for the company and out of character for me.
That's right. Company reorganization can be forced to work by crisis and brute management strength. But it's the difficult and expensive way to get things done.